Hey everyone, my name is Byron, and I'm excited to share that I create content covering a wide range of topics, from wrestling reviews and film critiques, to anime insights, food explorations, travel adventures, and anything else that piques my interest. There's something for everyone here. Thank you for tuning in to my review of the Vince McMahon documentary series. If you enjoy what you see, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. I recently signed up for Netflix and dove into the Vince McMahon documentary. After watching the first episode, it's clear that many viewers might feel frustrated. The episode spends about 98% of its runtime chronicling how Vince McMahon climbed to success, from his early days working for his father in the 1970s to the monumental WrestleMania 1 in 1985. It paints a portrait of a man who achieved his American dream against all odds, rising from a backdrop of poverty and emotional, even physical, abuse. His father's old-school mentality, "I don't love you until you're successful," resonates deeply. The first part of this 6-episode series crafts Vince McMahon into a surprisingly sympathetic figure. We connect with his struggle to overcome obstacles and prove not just the naysayers wrong, but his own family as well. This theme of triumph over adversity reminds me of Lawrence of Arabia, where the protagonist experiences an exhilarating rise to greatness, only to face a tragic fall. It reflects a pattern often seen in the lives of celebrities, those who set unimaginable expectations for themselves or are burdened by the expectations of others. As we break down the first episode, it opens with Vince striding into the ring, techno music pulsating in the background, a vibe reminiscent of Christian Cage's entrance themes from both AEW and TNA. There's a palpable energy, a sense of anticipation. We meet a host of interviewees, including Eric Bischoff, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Linda and Shane McMahon, John Cena, Triple H, and Tony Atlas. An interesting tidbit, the documentary boasts over 100 hours of interview footage. That's a staggering amount considering each episode likely runs around 50 minutes. You can't help but wonder what gems have been left on the cutting room floor. Tony Atlas emerges as a standout in this first episode, delivering insightful commentary peppered with witty lines. He reflects, "I don't like talking about me. People wonder who I am. I haven't figured out who I am." Hulk Hogan chimes in, suggesting people don't really know the man behind the character. Triple H adds that professional wrestling often presents a facade, showing us characters rather than the true selves of the wrestlers. Shane McMahon succinctly captures the essence of their father's persona. Dad gets the rep that he wants. This sentiment rings true in the wrestling world, where individuals sometimes lose sight of their own identities, especially those with troubled childhoods, like Ric Flair. For many, their wrestling personas become a shield, a way to cope with past traumas, or to reclaim a sense of significance they felt was denied to them in their earlier years. Conversely, some wrestlers embody a larger-than-life image, masking darker realities. Take Fabulous Moolah, who played the villain in the ring but, as revealed later, was involved in heinous acts, including the exploitation of women and allegations of sexual misconduct, all in a bid to maintain her power and legacy. The documentary also touches on the controversial $3 million settlement Vince McMahon allegedly made with Janelle Grant, and reports of him paying $12 million to 4 women as hush money. It's worth noting that these interviews were conducted well before the Janelle Grant controversy erupted. However, there's a pacing issue here. It feels like they linger too long in the build-up, creating that "when will we get to the fireworks factory" vibe, a reference that fans of The Simpsons might appreciate. Much like Milhouse's frustration with the pacing of Itchy and Scratchy, you can sense a similar impatience here. The storytelling feels drawn out, leaving some viewers eager for the drama and intrigue they believe is just around the corner. This first episode sets the stage for an emotional roller coaster, but I can imagine some viewers growing restless. They're itching for the juicy details of Vince's alleged predatory behavior and sexual misconduct. Instead, the narrative focuses heavily on the construction of the WWF-WWE empire, providing essential context. Still, it's clear that not everyone will be satisfied with the slow build-up, especially when they expect revelations and are left hanging. Vince McMahon asserts that he doesn't want people to truly know him, and in many ways, WWE embodies 100% grade A Americana. The documentary includes a montage of clips that metaphorically touch on the Janelle Grant controversy, showcasing moments like the infamous Kiss My Ass Club, where wrestlers kiss his bare butt cheeks in the middle of the ring before tens of thousands of screaming fans. This stark contrast is followed by a segment depicting Vince being arrested and escorted out of an arena, a powerful image that resonates with the ongoing controversies surrounding him. Hulk Hogan weighs in, saying that viewers won't fully understand or comprehend what happened, they'll only know what they're told. This line strikes deep, addressing the reality that many in the wrestling business are merely characters, making it all too easy to hide their true selves. He emphasizes that while you may know wrestlers and promoters, you won't know the whole enchilada. Vince, Triple H, and Bret Hart echo this sentiment, stating that wrestling is an emotional journey and a morality play. Some might dismiss it as bullshit, but professional wrestling thrives on its characters, emotions, and grand narratives, all of which stir feelings and create compelling stories. Vince even mentions that professional wrestling is a mirror reflecting American culture. These statements contextualize the wrestling business, And as I watch, it becomes clear that this episode will delve into the 1980s and Vince McMahon's rise to power. It follows a predictable documentary format, establishing the history before diving into the juicier, more controversial aspects. The episode opens with Vince recounting his experiences with an abusive stepfather, sharing that when you're abused, you have to live with it until you escape. This narrative creates sympathy for him, as no one should endure such trauma. It's also notable that he expresses a deep love and care for his mother, despite strong allegations of her being sexually abusive toward him. There are disturbing stories suggesting his mother forced him into sexual situations or made him dress as a woman. Yet these allegations remain unaddressed in the documentary. His biological father, Vince McMahon Sr., was also emotionally abusive, absent during Vince's formative years. They only connected when Vince was a teenager, and the absence of a conversation about why his father wasn't present during his childhood adds to the complexity of their relationship. I have some theories that are important to consider. Often, people are so consumed by their work that they neglect their children. There's an old-school mentality that suggests abandoning children is beneficial, teaching them resilience and toughness. Many parents from previous generations treated their children as if they were property, lacking emotional connection. The prevailing attitude was often dismissive, fuck the kids. Thankfully, today's parents understand that such neglect can severely impact a child's self-esteem, leading to issues like emotional abuse, antisocial behavior, or even sociopathy, traits that many analyze in Vince McMahon. Vince also recounts a poignant moment when he first saw his father, hoping for a hug, only to receive a pat on the hand. This moment clearly affected him, as he lowered his head while recounting it in the interview. It's evident that the lack of paternal love has haunted him throughout his life. Many can relate to having parents who only value results over the struggles their children face, demonstrating a strict, business-like approach that can be emotionally damaging. It's interesting to note that Vince's abusive character in wrestling could be a reflection of his own trauma, as he often plays a father figure to the wrestlers. This behavior might be a reenactment of his disturbed paternal relationships. Furthermore, the allegations of him being a sexual predator could stem from the inappropriate experiences he faced during his childhood. The painful effects of his past are evident, and it's crucial to recognize how these experiences may have shaped his actions as an adult. It's interesting when Vince McMahon states that he never saw much wrestling until he met his father. He describes wrestling as two people having a beef with each other, culminating in a fight. Furthermore, he reflects on his childhood, mentioning that he never participated in typical father-son activities like baseball. Their relationship was strictly business. Vince emphasizes that all they had in common was blood, and even during his teenage years, the focus remained on business. The documentary reveals that Vince controlled the Bangor, Maine territory, a challenging feat as it was the most northern point of the WWF territory. Despite its success and profitability, his father merely acknowledged Vince's efforts with a casual, "You did pretty well." Vince's journey into commentary began when the announcer for one of his father's wrestling events threatened to walk off unless he was paid more. Vince Sr. then handed the job to Vince, which elicited a sense of empathy from me. It was clear that his father wasn't giving him an opportunity out of desire, but rather out of a reluctance to spend money. This reminds me of a personal experience when my father ran for comptroller of Connecticut. He asked me to create a logo for him, but he made it clear that he wouldn't pay me, despite my background in digital media and graphic design. Some relatives cringed at his lack of respect, and it felt like he was manipulating me into working for free under the guise of experience. This old-school mentality of making children work without compensation can be damaging and reflects the exploitative nature of Vince's relationship with his father. Many people interviewed in the documentary commented on Vince's commentary skills, calling him a terrible commentator. However, Vince's approach to commentary involved establishing the environment, like mentioning it was a sold-out arena, highlighting key characters and their accomplishments, discussing the conflict between wrestlers, and describing moves and actions. He also pointed out the importance of clearly defining who the heel and babyface are, introducing other characters through interference, and ending matches with something spectacular. I believe Tony Khan, who runs AEW, should take notes from everything Vince is saying. This insight is crucial because Vince is essentially outlining the fundamentals of effective professional wrestling. In contrast, sports-based professional wrestling often lacks character and emotional investment, leading to a narrower appeal and ultimately a less captivating experience. For a long time, AEW emphasized match after match, while WWE initially struggled but found momentum through character-driven storytelling, resonating deeply with audiences. Vince notes that while the formula seems easy, executing it is challenging. The documentary also reveals that Vince Sr. considered selling the WWF to Gorilla Monsoon. To acquire the company, Vince had to make 3 substantial payments to his father, who, along with other promoters, doubted Vince's ability to fulfill the financial commitment. If Vince missed any payments, he would lose both the money he'd already paid and the business itself. Vince expresses that he believes his father wanted him to succeed, but at times, he felt that Vince Sr. didn't want him to succeed either. This duality resonates with me, as many parents experience envy toward their children's successes or may inadvertently sabotage them. I felt a pang of sympathy when recalling my own father's political campaign for governor of Connecticut. In a commercial, he inaccurately portrayed my brothers and me as three black children with autism, which was misleading. Only one of us has autism, and my older brother and I are multiracial. The portrayal felt like a white man trying to position himself as a savior figure, and it hurt me deeply. As I was trying to establish myself as a filmmaker, it felt like my father's actions were undermining my efforts and potential. Some relatives suggested that he might have wanted to compete with me or felt threatened by my intelligence. This dynamic often leads to emotional manipulation, where the potential of children is overshadowed by parental fears. At this point in the documentary, I found much of the information presented to be familiar. Even for seasoned wrestling fans, it felt somewhat regurgitated, lacking the depth and fresh insights that could have made it more engaging. Vince McMahon expressed that he felt his father wanted him to struggle so he could truly understand what it meant to face difficulty. I can relate to that mentality of tough love and the idea that life doesn't always offer help. When my brother was younger, I made the decision to distance myself for over 10 years. My intention was to teach him that he couldn't rely on others to bail him out, and that life isn't always the idyllic Rockwellian image of happiness and comfort. I perceived him as somewhat spoiled and wanted him to grasp that people wouldn't always go out of their way to accommodate him, especially during the holidays. This decision was influenced by my own experience. I remember my father pressuring me to come home for Thanksgiving when I was in college because my brother missed me. I was trying to instill independence in my brother, teaching him that he wouldn't always get his way, and that people need to build themselves up through their own efforts. Vince's desire to upgrade his product and compete beyond traditional wrestling territories was met with resistance from his father, who clearly didn't want him to take over. Other promoters warned Vince Sr. that his son would end up in the bottom of the river, yet Vince wasn't intimidated. He asserted that wrestling wasn't anyone's exclusive territory. He wanted competition, and he embraced the spirit of America as a land of opportunity. His willingness to stand against threats and pursue a larger vision, despite the risks of facing sabotage and even potential violence, is commendable. It's a powerful illustration of the American dream, underscoring the struggles many face with familial obstacles and unfair competition. Eric Bischoff's comment about Vern Guying, who called Vince Satan for monopolizing territories, is an interesting foreshadowing, given that Vince has often been labeled a devil figure in the industry. Wrestlers left their original territories to join Vince for better pay and opportunities, which speaks to the significant shift in wrestling's landscape. In the film, The Iron Claw, Fritz von Erich is shown drinking a beer and discussing his son Kerry's accomplishments in the WWF. This highlights how the WWF title, once considered secondary to the NWA Championship, had risen to be the most prestigious title in professional wrestling, a remarkable transformation. One commentator noted the unprecedented migration of wrestlers to a single company, which was detrimental to promoters who had once dominated their territories. Vince's cutthroat approach exemplified the harsh realities of the wrestling business. Tony Atlas's remark about it being a dog-eat-dog world resonates deeply. In this environment, loyalty can often fall by the wayside. A single phone call from Vince promising better pay could lead a wrestler to abandon the promoter who helped build their character. This harsh truth in business, where the old adage, all is fair in love and war, applies, underscores the importance of seeking better opportunities, even at the risk of betrayal. Vince's assertion that he wasn't taking anything from anyone and was focused on building his empire reinforces an essential truth about resilience. This resonates with my own experiences as a filmmaker. I faced bullying and emotional abuse during projects like the 48-hour film project in New Haven, where I encountered racism and underhanded tactics aimed at getting in my head. I learned that some people exploit perceived naivety, but I emerged stronger from those experiences. I've come to understand the importance of not presenting myself as overly vulnerable while also exposing issues as a counterattack. My ongoing efforts to improve my YouTube channel and grow my skills through travel videos and other projects signify my commitment to becoming a better filmmaker. I've witnessed many individuals attempt to undermine my success or diminish their own achievements by playing dirty, but I find inspiration in Vince's resilience. His perspective encourages me to continue moving forward in a competitive landscape filled with unethical behavior. Ultimately, it's about becoming stronger and seizing what you want from life, despite the challenges and obstacles that arise. Vince McMahon had a plan to pump some serious adrenaline into the WWF. He needed a champion who could not just wrestle, but light up the room with charisma. Bob Backlund? Good wrestler, sure, but the guy lacked that spark. Dusty Rhodes? Now there was a character, with his southern drawl and charm. But in the end, Vince made the call that would change the game. Hulk Hogan. Funny thing about Dusty, he didn't even believe in the opportunity. Just imagine a world where he donned the WWF title, captivating audiences with that twang of his. But Hogan? He had the look, the persona, and he could take down Andre the Giant. That was the ticket. Now Vince Sr. had his reservations. He fired Hogan for taking a role in Rocky III, convinced that movie stars and wrestlers were two different worlds meant to stay apart. But Hogan knew better. This is my chance, he thought. The Rocky franchise was Americana, and being part of it was like grabbing a golden ticket. Hogan wasn't just breaking into Hollywood, he was setting a precedent. He and Vince Jr. saw that the old ways were counterproductive. Nowadays, just look at The Rock or John Cena, huge movie stars who also happen to be wrestlers. They understood that a little Hollywood exposure could turn a wrestler into a household name. After his stint with Rocky, Hogan found himself working for Vern Guying in the AWA. But he wasn't going to stay there forever, wrestling in front of a few thousand fans in Chicago or Minneapolis. No way. He wanted the big leagues, and Vince McMahon knew just how to get there. McMahon had a vision of making wrestling mainstream, and he believed Hogan was the key. Tony Atlas had it right when he said Vince followed the river to riches, but never went upstream. He grasped that media was the future, and wasn't afraid to adapt. Unlike his father, who clung to the old ways, Vince was avant-garde, steering the ship toward a new horizon. To make Hogan a megastar, Vince understood he had to pit him against foreign gimmicks. Nationalism was all the rage in the 80s, and wrestling was no different. Fans loved to see the big blonde American take down the villainous foreigner, be it a Japanese wrestler, a German, or an Iranian. It was a time when those characters were crafted from the fabric of fear and prejudice, and Vince was unapologetic about it. And let's face it, the wrestling world was a reflection of the times. Political correctness? Not in the 80s. People wanted to see the hero triumph over the foreign foe, and that's exactly what they got. Fast forward to the 2010s, and the landscape had changed, but not without its share of controversy. Take Tessa Blanchard, the first woman to hold a men's heavyweight title in professional wrestling. A lot of chatter surrounded that move. Many praised it as groundbreaking, while others called it out for what it was, entitlement, masked as progress. Here's a woman who made headlines not just for her wrestling, but for her off-screen behavior. Difficult to work with, and not shy about her past comments, she carried a reputation that raised eyebrows. Critics pointed out the lack of believability in her matches, especially against larger opponents like Sami Callihan. It was hard to swallow that a woman barely tipping the scales at 150 pounds could take down a guy who looked like he could bench press a Buick. In the end, just as Hogan versus the Iron Sheik represented a classic clash of cultures, America strong against the foreign threat, the wrestling world continues to grapple with its own narratives. Some stories resonate, while others fall flat, but they all reflect the times and the values of the people watching. Vince McMahon Jr. had a vision. He was sitting there with Bob Backlund and Hulk Hogan, and he could feel the weight of the moment. Babyface versus babyface? Vince mulled it over. Nah, that wouldn't make for the kind of fireworks we need. So he flipped the script. Bob Backlund would defend against the Iron Sheik, a foreign foe who would serve as a perfect antagonist for the all-American Hulk Hogan. The night of that match? Pure magic. Hulk Hogan, the quintessential hero, stood in the ring, muscles glistening under the lights, the crowd roaring like a beast awakened. When Hogan slammed the Sheik and took that title, it wasn't just a win, it was a seismic shift in the wrestling universe. Vince had crafted a narrative, and boy did it resonate. It was Hogan's moment to shine, and the world was tuned in. Hogan, in that post-match interview, proclaimed, "Hulkamania is worldwide." And Vince, ever the showman, couldn't help but chime in, "You've never seen such an exciting champion before." These weren't just words, they were the building blocks of a legend, a storytelling masterstroke designed to ensure Hogan stood out in a crowded field. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Later, Vince Sr. would drop a bombshell on his son. "You know what, Vinny? All these friends of mine? They ain't really friends. These promoters I've been working with all these years in their territories. Fuck 'em. You're beating all of them, and I'm proud of what you've done. Fuck them all." There it was, that old-school mentality. Love only after the accolades, respect only after the success. That perspective resonated with me, reflecting the mentality in my own family. I remember my grandmother expressing regret for being so hard on my father, wishing she could apologize for the harsh treatment he endured. It highlighted the complexities of familial love and achievement in my life, how respect often came only after success, and how that shaped a person's journey. As I compared this to my own experiences, I felt a deep empathy for those who faced similar struggles. My parents beamed with pride when I excelled in college, but that pride came at a cost. They frequently belittled my older brother, who struggled with English and often presented himself poorly at family gatherings. It stung to witness their harshness, especially during moments like Thanksgiving, when my brother would act out, perhaps drink too much, and become the punchline of our family narrative. In those moments, I understood the weight of those old-school beliefs, the pressure to perform, and the conditional nature of love and respect. It was a mentality that could leave scars, a truth that echoed through generations, both in my family living room and in the world of wrestling. It's wild to think about those celebrity interviews after Hulk Hogan snatched the WWF title from the Iron Sheik. There was Andy Warhol, of all people, sitting there amidst the spectacle of professional wrestling. Most folks associate him with art history, not body slams and suplexes. But that was the beauty of it. Wrestling was becoming a pop culture phenomenon. Then, there was Linda McMahon, insisting Vince take a 2-week vacation in the Caribbean. It was during that escape he concocted the idea for WrestleMania, the Super Bowl of professional wrestling. He recognized how television shows wrap things up with a bang before going on hiatus, just like major sports do. Why couldn't wrestling do the same? He envisioned an event so grand it would be broadcast via closed-circuit television or pay-per-view, making fans feel like they were part of something monumental. WrestleMania had some interesting facts. It screened in 24 countries, and Hulk Hogan and Mr. T were hot off their appearances on Saturday Night Live. That was also the fateful night when John Stossel tried to expose the wrestling business, only to receive a slap from Dr. David Schultz that silenced his skepticism in an instant. Hogan later reflected on that slap during a documentary, acknowledging the predetermined nature of wrestling, but emphasizing the real toll it takes on its performers. He'd undergone 23 surgeries in 10 years. Those were no fakes. The physicality of the sport is real, and calling it fake is an insult to the athletes who put their bodies on the line. Then there was the infamous incident on Hot Properties, where Richard Belzer, dismissing wrestling as fake, egged Hogan into a front chin lock. Belzer fell and hit his head on the stage, bleeding a bit, which led to a lawsuit against the WWF, Hogan, and Mr. T. Talk about a public relations nightmare. If WrestleMania had flopped, Vince McMahon could have lost everything, including his house. Yet, that night in Madison Square Garden, 35,000 fans packed the arena, and one of the announcers declared it the biggest moment in wrestling since Gorgeous George. Vince's goal for WrestleMania was clear: to showcase WWF as the ultimate form of entertainment, a melting pot of spectacle and drama. Vince himself remarked, "I don't know if it was good for the industry, but it was good for our business." Hogan noted how they transitioned from attracting cigar smokers and beer drinkers to families eager to buy merchandise for their kids. That was the moment wrestling went mainstream. The documentary wraps up with Vince's poignant observation: when you find success, you become a target. And that old adage that all publicity is good publicity? Complete bullshit. As the episode closes, it teases the next part, which will tackle the early 90s steroid scandal that almost landed Vince in jail, a clash with the federal government that he somehow navigated. I genuinely enjoyed this documentary. It was insightful and engaging, but it also established the context for Vince McMahon's tumultuous past. Many know he endured emotional and physical abuse as a child, with tales of sexual abuse as a child, and him being forced to be a sexually submissive role during that alleged sexual child abuse. In an early 90s Playboy interview, he expressed a chilling wish that his stepfather had lived long enough for him to kill him himself. That speaks volumes about the abuse he faced, and it's worth noting he was also abusive toward his biological mother. This complexity makes it hard not to feel empathy for him, but therein lies a danger. The documentary seems to tread a fine line, perhaps intentionally framing him as sympathetic to counterbalance the darker realities we know, his predatory behavior and the sociopathic tendencies that sometimes overshadow his achievements. When they discussed Vince's takeover of the wrestling territories, they didn't adequately address the collateral damage inflicted on countless lives. It's a classic American dream narrative, a tale of a man outshining a father who was emotionally absent and abusive. Crafting Vince as a sympathetic character is controversial, but in storytelling, it's often necessary to avoid monotony and keep the audience engaged. However, there's a risk in portraying him too sympathetically, especially given the troubling history of overworked wrestlers, untimely deaths, and the various controversies surrounding WWE, from racial struggles to the infamous Kiss My Ass Club. It will be fascinating to see how this documentary balances the duality of Vince McMahon. Can he remain a sympathetic character while also confronting the darker aspects of his legacy?